Just over a month since Superman was released in theaters, the DCU has returned with Season 2 of Peacemaker. Up until this week, I hadn't actually seen Season 1 of Peacemaker all the way through, but because the show was coming out, I decided to rewatch The Suicide Squad and Peacemaker Season 1 so I could be ready for Peacemaker Season 2. One of the things that confused a lot of people, myself included, about the announcement of Peacemaker Season 2 is that both The Suicide Squad and Season 1 of Peacemaker took place in the old Zack Snyder DCEU, the same universe where movies like The Man of Steel or Batman vs. Superman took place. So, with Peacemaker Season 2 being the second live-action project of the DCU, it's very confusing at how all of this was going to tie in together. It felt like that question was going to be resolved with the fact that there were two Peacemakers in the trailer, so we were dealing with some kind of multiversal thing, and that's how we were going to get to the Season 2 of Peacemaker that takes place in the same universe as James Gunn's Superman that came out this year. Now, real quick, before we get into the review of Peacemaker Season 2, Episode 1, I just thought I should give my thoughts real quick on Season 1. I personally enjoyed Season 1 of Peacemaker a lot more than I thought I would. I watched the first episode when it originally came out and decided not to continue watching it. I thought it was a little too politically heavy-handed with a lot of woke messaging, intersectional feminism, kind of stuff that I feel like normally takes away from the show. And don't get me wrong, it is riddled in all of Season 1 in Peacemaker, but the thing that impressed me this last week when I went back and watched it was how much it really didn't affect that much of the story. Robert Patrick was a great villain in the first season. I thought all of the side characters were actually very easy to care about, and I thought some of the character writing was done very well in the show. I do think that some of the dialogue was weaker, and I didn't love the ending all that much, as well as some of the outcomes that the show led to, but I enjoyed it, and I had a good time when I watched Season 1. I wasn't really sure where Season 2 was going to go from there. I thought Season 1 worked as a pretty good standalone kind of sequel to the Suicide Squad movie, which is, in a sense, a sequel to the 2016 Suicide Squad movie. And I wasn't convinced the Season 2 was a good idea, and based off the first episode, I'm still not convinced. Now, I'm not condemning this show to failure in my own metric, because I didn't enjoy Season 1, Episode 1 of Peacemaker, but I ended up enjoying the show as a whole. Now, I'd say I disliked this episode more than I disliked Season 1, Episode 1, so that's not a great sign, but overall, I feel like maybe there's a chance for this show still, but I'm not super confident, and let's get into why that is. The first thing with Peacemaker is the recap. You actually have to discuss the recap in this because it does some pretty major things. It actually goes back and it retcons a scene from the ending of Peacemaker Season 1. So the ending of Peacemaker Season 1, we get a cameo from the Justice League, as well as specifically Jason Momoa's Aquaman and Ezra Miller's Flash. This comes after Peacemaker kills the cow. He has an interaction with both Aquaman and the Flash, obviously because at the time Peacemaker was canon to the DCEU. In the recap, however, they retcon this by having Adebayo call the Justice Gang instead of the Justice League, and it changes the Aquaman-Flash interaction to Hawkgirl and Guy Gardner. Now, to me, it is interesting that they did not change Season 1 of Peacemaker to they didn't just add these changes in. I'd imagine it was probably a bit more work than they wanted to do, but that's not a great idea when you're trying to kick off more of the DCU, because now it's just even more confusing. Because if you go back and you watch Season 1 of Peacemaker, which it seems like you really need to do to understand what's happening in Season 2 of Peacemaker, then you're going to have all these DCEU connections, whereas this show is supposed to take place in the DCU. The opening of the show is dealing with some of the fallout, and it sets up, I guess, what the story is going to be about going forward, where Peacemaker heads into his storage portal dimension. It turns out to be the pocket universe that we know from the Superman movie, and he goes in there, and Eagly, his pet bald eagle, flies to a different door, and it turns out that that door leads Peacemaker to an alternate universe where his dad, who he killed in Season 1, is still alive, as well as we later find out his brother Keith is also alive. From there, we get a 6-month time jump where Peacemaker gets in the car with Leota Adebayo as he drives to an interview to join the Justice Gang. In there, we get a fun interaction between Sean Gunn's character Maxwell Lord, Guy Gardner, and Hawkgirl. It's not anything amazing. I didn't like them as much as, I guess, their small interactions in Superman, but overall, I guess it was kind of nice to see some of the returning characters, as much as I did not love Superman as a whole. Peacemaker leaves the interview. He goes to see Harcourt, who is played by James Gunn's wife, Jennifer Holland, who is currently also searching for a job after the fallout from Peacemaker Season 1, but she keeps getting rejected everywhere. This leads to some kind of argument, as it seems their romantic relationship has collapsed from whatever form it was in. Peacemaker is very sad, and he throws a giant sex orgy and travels back in the Pocket universe and goes to the next multiverse where his dad and brother are sitting there and they reminisce about old times. Obviously, Peacemaker himself is very shook about what's going on because both his dad and his brother are dead. The second Peacemaker comes back after his dad and brother go to sleep. There's a big fight, and in the end of the episode, the Peacemaker we've been following all episode kills the new Peacemaker. Obviously, it seems like the rest of the season is going to have to deal with how he covers that up and potentially takes his place or whatever in the other universe. That is a very brief summary of the episode. There's a lot more minor minutia going on in there, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that as this video goes on. I wasn't hooked as much by the setup. I thought some of the hooks in episode 1 of season 1 were pretty good and wanted to bring you back the next week. I think the ending is a solid twist. I'm going to be curious at how it plays out, so I will come back and watch episode 2. But all the other setup, I'm not super in love with. So we get confirmation that the events of The Suicide Squad, which remember is a sequel to Suicide Squad 2016, happened in this movie because Frank Grillo plays Rick Flag Sr., and it is mentioned that Peacemaker killed his son because obviously in The Suicide Squad, Peacemaker killed Rick Flag Jr., and that actually had a very big impact on Peacemaker's character development in season 1. Just going off of what's confirmed through this whole thing, we know all of the events of season 1 of Peacemaker are DCU canon, except for it's been retconned. Instead of the Justice League showing up in the finale, it was the Justice Gang. Okay, but that means Peacemaker was still in the hospital at the start of season 1 of Peacemaker, and he had to be there because he was shot by Bloodsport in the Suicide Squad, which Bloodsport wouldn't be in the Suicide Squad if he wasn't in prison for putting Superman in the hospital kryptonite bullet. But Superman that came out this summer told us Superman had never lost a fight before. So, I mean, we're just like, maybe this is a nitpick. I don't know. It seems kind of plot hole-ish to me that the canon of this universe that's already super confusing is now even more confusing. So just to put into perspective how confusing the DC canon is right now, we have James Gunn's new DCU, which technically launched with Creature Commandos, but that was a very unwatched show. So Superman is what I consider the official launch. And then Peacemaker Season 2 is the second project. However, Peacemaker Season 2 is a sequel season to Peacemaker Season 1, which is a sequel to a movie that takes place in a different timeline. Because remember, The Suicide Squad stars Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn, whose entire character arc and story in that movie is still fallout from 2016 Suicide Squad. All of that still happens. Amanda Waller, all of that is a big effect from post-Snyder DCEU Suicide Squad 2016. It has effects on The Suicide Squad. So there's all that. That's just the confusing part in what this show sets up. On top of that, as far as the meta, more looking into it, there's currently a Batman Part 2 that is being made. That's a sequel to a Batman movie that has a show called The Penguin that was extremely successful and popular. That's completely disconnected from all of this DCU mess. Any newcomer looking to just get into the DC universe is going to be lost trying to find. They're gonna be like, okay, wait, so there was the Batman in 2022, but that's not the same as this Superman that came out that I kind of liked? Or is it, I kind of like the Superman movie, so maybe I'll watch Peacemaker, but wait, it's season 2, so I need to watch season 1, but why are they talking about the Suicide Squad? So I guess I should go watch that. You can see where the slippery slope kind of comes in here with the confusingness of the canon. The timeline is also a little off. It's been, so between the opening shot and the bulk of the episode, we have 6 months in between that, so we know there's that much time between those two. It's really unclear how much time passed between season 1 of Peacemaker and that opening shot, but the way this show talks about the events of season 1, it feels like it was all relatively recently, so it's within the last few months. Superman is mentioned to have taken place over the last summer. It's all very timeline confusing, let alone the fact that obviously all those old DCEU movies are like not canon, but somehow some of them are canon. As long as James Gunn had some connection to it, it's canon, I guess. Now, I feel like maybe if someone comes in completely blind and just watches season 2, it might flow a little more. But to me, who just recently watched The Suicide Squad and Peacemaker Season 1 back to back, it feels very weird that all of this happens in the same universe as Superman that came out in the summer. On top of that, let's assume all of the timeline, all of the canon works completely correctly, and none of that confusing Zack Snyder DCEU to DCU connection exists. I think that just like I had some problems with maybe introducing extreme concepts like cloning Kryptonians or pocket universes in Superman for your first universe movie, I think the second live action project immediately going into multiversal territory is a pretty big jump, and I really don't think it's that smart of an idea. You know, you look at the MCU didn't even consider touching the multiverse really until we got to 2016 with Doctor Strange, where it was even referenced, and it still didn't go into it that much. And it wasn't until Avengers Endgame and the fallout from that the multiverse got introduced, and it immediately kind of tanked a lot of the universe in the MCU, and it led to some messy storytelling. So I don't think it's really a great idea to just jump right back into this with your second project. On top of that, Superman was a movie that appealed to families with an extent. It was kind of a family movie. You know, you could bring your kids to it, they could have a good time. Peacemaker season 2 was kind of supposed to tie together some of the loose threads from Superman, and your kids can't watch the show. This is not a kid-friendly show. There's nudity, there's a lot of language, there's all kinds of stuff. Your kids shouldn't watch this show, so we're cutting out a large portion of audience there. I get that Peacemaker is an original James Gunn creation, and like I said, I enjoyed elements from season 1. I thought the cast was all very good. I liked the side characters. I liked John Cena as Peacemaker. I think he does a really good job of season 1, but I think this was something he needed to just let live in the past. Once you start tying him in, I do think it makes things way too clunky with the references to characters like Green Arrow or with Superman and the Suicide Squad. You know, there's too many passing lines of dialogue or connections to old movies that you really should just leave it separately. I thought it was still going to be clunky, but would work better if it was a scenario where the Peacemaker from season 1 is from this universe and he comes over to James Gunn's Superman universe, and that's where this Peacemaker is. I still thought that was going to be clunky, but I thought it could work better. Now that it's the same Peacemaker seemingly, I think it's all over the place. It's very confusing to follow, and I think it takes away a lot from episode 1. I didn't have that many moments in episode 1 where I was super hooked on the story. I thought that the dancing intro was a major letdown for me. I know some people don't like this. Some people love it. I loved season 1's dancing intro. I thought it was fun. I did think it set the mood of kind of, you know, you're going into a show that's got these serious characters, but that, you know, you're still going to have a good time. It's a fun show. Felt like this one lacked a lot of like the emotion that the first one had. Obviously, the whole joke is that they're dancing emotionless. I feel like there was more impact, I guess, and emotion in the intro from season 1 than there was in this one. A little disappointed. I'll probably be skipping the intro from now on, which I didn't do with season 1. I actually watched the intro every time with season 1, but I'm going to probably be skipping this one. I don't like the song as much as Do You Really Want to Taste It? That's obviously not a critique of the story. That's more of a personal preference. Some people might like this one more or less. I just don't like it as much. I thought it was funny that the Justice Gang mentioned they were trying to limit casualties when that was kind of a whole plot hole in Superman, that they, or not plot hole, but like plot line, that they literally didn't limit casualties in Superman. So that seems like some kind of plot misconception there already, unless maybe now it's a new policy they're trying to limit it. I feel like a lot of this existing is because it stars James Gunn's wife as one of the main characters, Harcourt. Harcourt is interesting in season 1 because she has all of the makings to be a turbo modern girl boss like you see in some of the Marvel movies going on right now. But in season 1, they actually do a good job of kind of limiting her ability. She's not just kicking the crap out of grown dudes and all stuff. There's a little bit of that, but it's pretty dialed back in season 1, and she has a lot more to her character than just that. So far in season 2, they dialed it up to 11. She walks into a bar and beats the crap out of grown men. Obviously, eventually she gets the crap beat out of her, but she's holding her own for a pretty long while, and it takes a large amount of men to overpower her, which I guess the justification would be she's trained for this, but that's kind of just not how that works. You know, 300-pound dude is going to be able to throw around 120-pound girl, no matter how good of her training is. Some of the political intersectional feminism stuff that's in season 2 of Peacemaker, I will say the wokeness, intersectional politics stuff is heavily dialed back from season 1 so far. Season 1, it was all over the place in there. I still don't like it being in the shows. It's very clunky and distracting when stuff like that is in the show, but I thought Peacemaker season 1 did a good job of navigating it with how much was in there. Season 2, it seems like they've cut a lot of that, which I'm glad about. There wasn't as many good moments with John Cena's acting, I felt like, so far in season 2 as there was in season 1, but there's still a lot more time. Like I said, I really like John Cena's acting in season 1. I'm expecting him to still be a highlight here in season 2. As of right now, I'm not super optimistic with how season 2 is going to go. I'm not like dying to know what happens next. I know I didn't talk that much about the inner workings of what happened in episode 1. That's because so far there's really not that much. It was a lot of setup in this episode. most of the issues I have with it are from that greater meta, looking at the universe concept, being super confused at what is what timeline-wise. Either, in my next review will either be on episode 2, or I'll go ahead and wait until the full season's out and give a full review in that sense. But just because season 2, episode 1 is out, I wanted to give you my quick thoughts on it and some of the problems I already see in the shortcomings. So, thanks for watching.